postdoc jobs or anything like that? No.
We do have jobs at the MagLab. They're not always available, but when they're available, we do put them on our website. You can contact scientists and say, I'm graduating, I was part of the summer school, I'm really excited, I'd love to work at the MagLab. Are you aware of any opportunities? We can share that around and see what we can do.
Every. Oh, sorry.
That definitely doesn't do any harm to contact people ahead of time, because many of us, the lab, has positions. You're probably going to talk about that, right? The fellowships. Yeah, but individual PIs also have their own research grants, and this time of year is when they're announced. So there's usually a little bit of an uptick in positions over the summer and into the fall. It's a good time to look.
I was gonna say we have a lab named postdocs that we set out for every 2 years. One is the Jack Rowe Fellowship for newly. If you are a graduate, for example, within the first 5 years of your PhD, you can be qualified, even if it's your second postdoc. And the other one is Schuler. The pay is, I think, comparable to other national labs. And we had already one of those people that's on that poster there was Jack Rowe postdoc. And it's very competitive. We announce it every 2 years. Sometimes if you did a very good job during the time that you were here, you can extend it for a third year. And also it depends on the availability of funds. And usually we always have funds, like Eric?
Also, look at the annual reports. Look at our other users. Oh. Well.
There you go.
Yeah. So we have users. Besides you know the groups, you know what you're doing. If you're interested in the same sort of thing, look at your competitors. Also contact them directly. Look at the annual reports. Look at other fields and stuff. So that's also a whole resource there in the annual report of a whole bunch of science, and no guarantee any one of them is hiring, but it's a big group and it's a resource. So.
And I'll just add that we also, for positions at the MagLab, because I see Kristen back there giving us the stink eye, they're also heavily promoted on social media. So Twitter, Facebook, all those other little icons, LinkedIn. Yeah, so those are always popping up. So if you network with us on those, you will get the information as soon as it comes out.
Question?
So you guys are both help with users and do your own research. How does this sort of environment differ from, say, an academic setting? Because it's probably very different.
Somewhat. Instead of doing teaching in an academic environment where you'd have sort of half teaching, half research, and then a bunch of service tossed in, and half something else, we have half user support, half research. So it's fairly equivalent in that respect, but our teaching is much more user support, one-on-one kind of instruction, small groups and stuff, and summer schools. But so it's not that different. The other difference between this position here or a national lab is that it's not tenured because it's soft money. So that's a big difference between the positions as such. So we're on soft money. If the NSF stops sending us money and you stop reporting all those publications, like Eric says, my job goes away.
Well, I mean, I think Scott kind of hit the nail on the head. We don't do the teaching in the formal setting, but it's actually the real-world applications in the laboratory. Okay, so you learned about this and you memorized it for a test, but do you really know how to apply it and take it to the next level? And outreach, I think we do a lot of our service is done through outreach through K through 12 and REU program and a lot of mentoring. So we do, I think the difference is that we don't have that formal teach Gen Chem or Physics 1 that the tenured professors do.
One point. We are unique, though, compared to other national labs, because we are affiliated very closely with FSU. So, and you, sorry. That's really bad because I used to, I was his colleague. I've actually been at both places. But yeah, so there are opportunities, you know, down the road where you could come here either as a postdoc working for a faculty member or as a faculty member at FSU. All of the departments in the sciences have faculty who are affiliated with the lab. So that's another way into the lab. But then you would be like another academic institution. You'd be teaching and then have a research group. But the folks who live here most of the time at the lab, you know, as you've heard, they're doing the 50-50 user support and research.
They play off of each other. So you do research, you get almost to a result, and you say, well, I have to build this new thing in order to get the last 2 decibels of signal-to-noise ratio that I need. And well, now that I've built it, let's build 20 and deploy them for the user program. And it also goes the other way around. We have a user who needs whatever. We're going to put some resources into figuring this out, and now it's part of the user program, and I'm a user too, so I get to use it. So it plays in both directions.
So working at a national lab, do you say you have more or less freedom to like pursue new projects and ideas compared to working at a university? And is that different here where you're more closely affiliated with Florida State versus like another national lab that doesn't really have a university affiliation?
There's probably a little less in direction. Many faculty can go off in any direction after tenure. Some do, some change their research completely. I'm going to be pretty closely associated with measurements in high magnetic fields, or I will be looking for a faculty job at another university. So there's a little less freedom in that respect. The fact that, as William said, that we can mix our service, our teaching mixes quite closely with our own research, that their sort of thing gives me a little more freedom in that respect, that I don't have the set teaching responsibilities of teaching Physics 101.
I think the probably only limitation or common denominator is just the notion of magnetic field. We do the research related to magnetic fields. And within this, it's the whole universe. It depends on you which direction to go. It's like you can speak French or English and then live your life there.
One of the best things about being working at the MagLab is your exposure to all the different sorts of people like you guys that come through. So actually the flexibility that you gain is a type that you probably wouldn't be able to imagine on your own because of all this input that you're getting just from talking to people you've never seen before, who are working on things that you've never seen before. And in that way, it's actually, so I was a postdoc at Los Alamos, which was great. I loved it. But it's not like that there. You work with your group, you do your project, and it's fantastic, but you don't have that extra exposure.
Yeah, so what he's referring to is what we jokingly call silos of excellence. And that's something we very much try to actively avoid here at the MagLab. And the other nice thing about working here is your access to resources to help you develop instrumentation, resources to help you put a lab together to do research. A lot of what we can do here cannot be done at a chemistry department or a physics department, even at a Research One university, because they just don't have those resources to do the kind of cutting-edge research that we do.
Can you talk a little bit about the limitations of biological samples that you can bring in? Like if I wanted to bring a mouse study here, do you have like an animal facility and like that takes a long time? Does anyone know?
Most of our users are animals, so we already have licenses.
We do have an animal facility. We do have an animal facility here on campus. Everything has to be vetted through the animal protocols on campus. So you have to, come up with your protocols. You have to do the same thing wherever you are. And so whatever protocols you're using there, we would have to take those and adapt those for here, get those approved, and then. But we do have an animal facility and
if you're interested in imaging or biophysics, there's a full capability for animal care, handling the protocols and so on at the University of Florida. So if you're interested in structure, biophysics, and so on, they're totally set up for that, and they're inside the medical school, so they're really tightly controlled. So, but they use NMR techniques to look at structure, function, functional imaging, things like that. But they also reach out to other parts of biophysics and biomedical engineering. So you might look at that if you're interested in that.
If one want to come as a graduate student, as a researcher, let's say, and which period of time you would recommend to be, like 6 months, 3 months, or? And the second question will be, can one choose to be for a while in certain group with certain people, and how the mentoring will go there and all that stuff? Just for a graduate student, you want to learn something here.
So is that become a graduate student or FSU, or as a graduate student at your home institution who wants to come here?
Yes, at the home institute, and just spend some while here, let's say.
Just to give an example, I mean, you obviously need to fund it, but there are lots of programs. I've had a Brazilian student here for a year. She's leaving actually today, which is really sad because it's been a really good experience. But and we've had other students from, I think it was Slovakia. We had a student for 3 months who came. So that whatever country you're in, there are often sources of money that can fund exchange. We love that because it's hard to fund students, and having somebody 3 months, 6 months, if it fits in with what you're doing back home, we'd love to have you here, and it really helps build a much stronger link to a user than just having somebody come for a week if you've got a student who came for 3 months. So,
if you want to learn specific technique, it depends. The length of time depends on what you're learning. So if you want to do high pressure diamond anvil cells, maybe 3 months would get you started. 6 months makes you a much better expert, but that would depend on sort of the complications of the technique and what you want to get out of it as a graduate student.
So principally, it's possible, right, to contact someone and then make the
Yeah.
frame.
Oh yeah. Make a direct connection, figure out who's doing what you want to learn, then figure out how long it'll take, and then start looking for funding. I mean,
Good. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Just additional to his question. So in that case, National Magnetic Field Lab doesn't offer an internship just for that kind of purposes. No.
So we have the RU program during the summer, so that's our big official.
But that's for undergraduate mostly, right?
And then you may have faculty who have their own individual grants, who would have dollars to bring in students, and they may, let's say they have a collaboration with your advisor. Then they may work out a deal where they provide some support for you and your advisor provides the other half of the support. So I've seen those type of arrangements happen as well.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it can be done if you work it out creatively with your advisor. If your advisor thinks it's a good for you to spend a couple of months here. I had a student from UCF, Orlando, spend almost half a year in my lab a few years ago, and she got a lot of data towards a PhD during that period, and nobody paid anything. I mean, there was no exchange of funds. She gave up her apartment in Orlando and found a place here, and she was still a graduate student. She'd done satisfied all her course requirements, so she could still get a stipend from UCF. You know, physics students do this all the time when they go to Fermilab or you know, CERN. Yeah. So.
So do you guys meet regularly based, and do you design your own experiment within your own group, and who is participating in that? If you design your own experiments and let's say from samples and collaborate, I mean, on your own base without a user.
I mean, we're not an oil producer, right? But we have, you know, I probably have 600 oil samples up in the flammable cabinet. So we either get samples from people from around the world that are very, very limited number of people are, oh, I did a Google search and you guys can do high resolution mass spectrometry of oil. That's not how our users are, that's not how we get users. Basically, we go out and find the people that have the cool samples that we want to work with. So if you're smart about working in a user facility, you can kill two birds with one stone. You can do your own research, but also bring users into the facility at the same time. And then it's a win-win for the lab and for you doing your own independent research. And I think that, you know, if there's experiments that I'm interested in doing that don't require anything other than a standard crude oil, we work with the graduate students that are in the facility or other faculty or other students from the user groups that are in the facility. So, I mean, I think we can do both.
So, are there more stricter requirements on how you fund your own experiments? You apply for grants just like professors, but say, could you pick up more user responsibilities to get funding from the MagLab or national funding?
So we have an internal program called the User Collaboration Grant Program, where you would have a scientist from inside pair up with a user from outside, and they would work together to either develop a technique or work in an area that is high risk, high reward. Typically, though, if say Dimitri's going to go out and get a gigantic grant, he would then actually have less time doing user support because that grant is going to have specific requirements on what he would need to do to fulfill the obligation. Does that answer your question, or? We have some flexibility, but like anything else, if you look at, say, your canonical physics department, if everybody goes out and gets a gigantic grant and asks for release from teaching, everything, you know, the wheels come off the organization. So yes, we have some flexibility, but not infinite flexibility in how we can rearrange what the distribution of time would be for a given research faculty. But at the same time, we do have that flexibility. To use Dimitri again as an example, last summer he was able to go on a sabbatical for about 3 months. Oh. They wouldn't let him stay any longer. It wasn't that we wouldn't let him go longer. So we are able to do that. And we also really give them wide latitude in where they want to go with their individually driven research. So we don't peer over their shoulders and say, this is a good idea, that's a bad idea. We leave it up to them.
A lot of the questions thus far have been really about how the Magnet Lab works in career kind of stuff. I actually have a more technical question, so if that's not appropriate, let me know. I also have another question. I do transport measurements on graphene, and one of the things I've been thinking about this week are dominant noise sources. In particular, my lab typically uses wire bonds to bond our samples, and understand that the resistive magnets have this cooling water that may cause some vibration. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I were to bring a sample here, would the vibration cause my wire bonds to oscillate and put some noise in there? Or is that a noise source that's going to be so low that I shouldn't care about that?
So the, well,
Go ahead. Yeah, you got it. I don't think, no. Is the yeah. We can argue who says the word. Wire bonds are very short. The resonant frequencies are very high. So your, they're not affected. The water's 100 hertz. It's fairly low frequency. So as long as the bonds are very short length, I don't think it's the vibration is going to be a problem. We also tend to isolate the cryostats as much as possible from the magnets themselves and reduce the vibration. We've done fairly well with that, but so I don't think it's going to be an issue. Are you using a 2400 as your Keithley 2400 as your gate voltage?
Yes, or a Yokogawa.
That's well, then yeah. If you use the Yokogawa, good. If you use the 2400, that's a major source of noise. Don't do it. and as evidence, use a 2450. I mean that everybody uses the 2400. They ask us to do it. They're crap.
Got it.
Yeah. So and as evidence to back up that this actually works, the Hofstadter butterfly in 2 separate groups was done here. So the 31 Tesla magnet in cell 9 that you're using for your practical, and the 45 Tesla hybrid magnet. No problem there. So we do, suspended graphene, bilayer graphene, trilayer graphene, graphene with vanilla ice cream, graphene 5 ways to Sunday. So it works well. As with any transport experiment, there's always some noise, but nothing that's endemic to graphene by itself.
And if you'll indulge me, a follow-up question. I'm obviously trying to become an experimentalist, which is why I'm here, and there is so much to learn. What are some really powerful learning experiences you've had? Like, what have you done? Anything that's kind of supercharged your ability to do experiments that you would recommend to budding experimentalists?
Failure.
I mean, you just have to jump in and do an experiment. So I mean, applying for a week of magnet time and coming is going to be an intense, 60 to 100 hour week of learning. So make a proposal and get the magnet time.
So far we spoke about users coming here and doing their experiments. What about if I want to do an experiment home? I may have the tools, but I'm not good at the setup, or I need to make some tools that you guys definitely have the knowledge to do. Would you be able to collaborate and share knowledge, and if yes, how that works?
We're generally pretty happy to talk about how we do stuff. There aren't a whole lot of secrets at this lab, at least not in the measurement. Maybe in exactly how they make the fields. But if there's a technique that you see done in papers here, we'll tell you what we know about it. Sometimes researchers will come in and they'll have a particular way they want to do something, and they'll do it that way, and we won't necessarily know how they did it. But usually it's reasonably obvious how the measurement got done.
So with all due respect to my esteemed colleagues here, none of them were good at something the first time they did it. It's only after doing it over and over again that you become good at it. So just do it.
Right. Well, and in terms of sharing technology, we have sent designs for rotators, for sample holders, for entire probe systems to users. Typically, we end up drawing the line where they say, can you just build me an exact copy of this?
Right, okay.
Because our machine shop, like all machine shops, is always oversubscribed. They have too much to do, and our stuff is going to take priority. So.
I have an example. I developed ultrasonic detector here recently, and I shared this information with a couple of groups who actually repeated this detector and use it now in their home laboratories. One of them is user coming here, another one is my former postdoc who works completely independently, not in magnetic field. So yeah, you are welcome to ask questions, of course.
Excellent, thanks.
Sorry to bug you this much. So that's a real issue that I'm facing, is that I'm the only guy in my group, so I have so many things to do that it's sometimes become unbearable. But in that case, I'm happy to do so because I'm learning, but that I think of an experiment that I think is useful, and I know that that will help my publication. But I just don't have the time to, pull it out, come back here, spend a week, and then go back with the measurement system, if it's a simple measurement. So do you guys have any system that I can just collaborate and send my sample, and you guys do the measurement for me? Not the Husband-Alphen, not the Husband-Alphen.
No, you have to come back.
I have to come back, okay.
Yeah, as a general rule, the users, especially graduate students, need to come back and do the work.
Not the Husband-Alphen.
I mean, I'll be honest. Our group actually, we do a lot of user support where the user just sends a sample. We do that, but having said that, I agree very much that it's whenever a group contacts me, I ask them, do you want to send a student? Because it just makes the whole project from beginning to end work that much better, because you've got somebody who's vested in the experiment. They learn, they go back with a lot more information that they would have had otherwise. So if you can come here, you should, you really should. But having said that, we do experiments.
There's two things here. One is you obviously prioritize your time for important experiments versus the ones where you might want to just send a sample. To us, we're prioritizing too, and if it's not worth your time and investment in the experiment, is it really ours? The other problem that we don't want to get into is if the experiment works great, you're going to say, look at what a great experiment I did. If it doesn't work, you're going to say, oh, those idiots at the Magnet Lab didn't do the measurement right. And so it's not a position we want to be in. So we really like the investment of the outside user's time in the experiment as a partner.
Yeah, in ICR, we kind of have about a 25% of our users actually come on site. And when they do come on site, we want the graduate student or the postdoc who's going to be the one responsible for defending and publishing the data to be on site to see how we prepare the sample, how the sample is acquired, and most importantly, how the data is processed. Because as Ryan and I showed you, you get 80,000 peaks. Well, that's great, but there's collecting the spectra takes about 10 minutes at the most. Processing the data takes about 3 days if you're good. So if you want to come and run 60 samples by the ICR, we are happy to come and let you be the one sitting there collecting the data and teach you how to process the data and give you the software and party down when you go back to your home institute. A lot of times with users that are new to running complex mixtures by ICR, I get them to send me 3 or 4 samples as a pilot. Give me 3 or 4 samples. I'll show you what the data looks like and send it back to you, and then we can try and tune the experiment a little bit more towards your targeted chemistries that you're interested in. And so we kind of do it both ways. Send me your samples, let's see if we're going to be able to answer the question for you, and then send your graduate student or postdoc down so that they can dive in and really be able to understand how the data is processed, because that is the ultimate limiter.
And I'll just throw in one more comment. As students and postdocs, your job is to learn. Your job is to get as much knowledge as you can before you walk out of your advisor's lab or before you walk out of your postdoc. Because let me tell you, once you're an early career faculty member, it's on you to make your research work, to make your grants work, to make your lab work. So the more you learn now is just putting money in the bank. So by being here, you're showing that you have an interest in doing that and that you're already on the right track, but keep that going.
when you become an early career researcher, all of a sudden you have a lot less time to mess with stuff. Oh. When you become an early career researcher, the time that you have to mess with stuff drops by a factor of 90%. So if you have a question that you would spend a week on as a graduate student, well, do I process the data this way or this way? You have to make that decision in less than an hour a few years later. So you should get good at all of the possible techniques early.
I have kind of a silly question and a normal question. How do you get one of the, this is NMR specific, so I'm looking at you. How do you get one of the posters that has the spins of the different nuclei on it? Yeah.
So not a silly question.
No, that one was the silly one. The other question is, so we always do NMR with protons, right? So it's always the proton spin that's on the thing. What's the frequency difference for neutrons versus protons?
Have you been yesterday in the
Not yet,
hands-on?
no.
Okay, I will discuss that.
Do you? Okay, then never mind. Half the class could answer me.
Okay, so this summer school has been just wonderful because all of you guys are here and all are easily accessible. When I come for my MagLab time, is it possible to like get in contact with all of you, or is it only like one user sort of around?
You can track us down and tackle us in the hallway.
Oh, all right, excellent. Thank you. Okay.
Right, but if they're here, you can talk to us. I probably couldn't help you with your experiments in the ICR.
And I couldn't help you down there. So if you need to sit ICR, come here. But
It sort of depends on what you want and
right.
you know who's around, but everybody's available. Nobody's.
You send an email ahead of time saying when your week is and I'll be here, can we talk?
Yeah.
Stop it.
You can buy some pizza.
Hot with food, chocolate, or coffee.
Pizza for sure.
Oh.
Chicken wings.
My question is how the intercooperation between among MagLabs. For example, for Amy, she has a lot of ICR data, and then so in this case, she would like to cooperate with some people who are good in bioinformatics or some statistics, and also she would like to learn some to see whether her sample might be interesting for NMR or MRI. So in this case, how the cooperation between works.
So we do, ICR is a little more isolated because we're not as integrated with the rest of the technique measurements. But we've co-published with EMR and EPR. We were working on a couple of metabolite projects that are using ICR and NMR at the same time for top-down proteomics type mixtures. So I think a lot of times if there's an interest I think NMR and ICR overlap a little more. So if there's a user that sends me a question and they're interested in doing NMR, I'll usually send them over, hey Tim, to Tim Cross, who's the director of the NMR facility, take a look at this, let me know what you think. There is a little bit of crosstalk, and we're trying to integrate more into the other user facilities so that we have multiple techniques across the board.
So we run, a proposal can have multiple facilities. So there's no limit on the number of facilities. Once you've proposed the science, then we arrange what facility you need. And it can be multiple facilities and stuff, and we will work transferring the experiment or how you want to do that with each other. So we're not completely in intellectual silos or what.
First experiment may be in DC, and then next you go to work in EMR, and next you go to pulse field.
And different ones have different overlaps. DC Fields overlaps with EMR, with the high B over T. We've had users start here, end up at high B over T, go to Los Alamos to higher fields and pulse fields. So we do have a lot of overlap of where people start, and then say I need additional techniques or fields or whatever and move to a different facility. There's no internal limits on that. No, no, you check a different box when you propose for the next experiment. Under the proposal, you know, you put in the proposal, that's the science, it gets reviewed. Then you say, I want to do an experiment, you check the box, say, I want to do a DC field. The next time you say, I want to do one in the pulse field. And so bureaucratically, they're a little different because there are different requirements of the different facilities, but it's not tough to say, check the different box, basically, and you select it. There is a time lag. I mean, you can't really say, Tuesday, I need more field. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I want to be running out at Los Alamos. That's going to be difficult. So, yes, you can't, but if you run a week here and then you say, okay, I've got my data at DC fields, I need to get to 60 Tesla, I'm going to go out, I'll put in an experiment. You can put an experiment in the next day to go run out at Los Alamos. And then whenever their schedule and approval process goes through. So there is a time lag, but it's not very big compared to trying to get time at a neutron source or any other national lab.
Have you ever recommended a user to go to Los Alamos to apply here?
Oh, yes. Yes. Certain techniques we look at and say, you know, you should do that out there. It's easier to get time, or they've got people to do magnetization up to higher field go out there. So we've even taken some people who've applied here and said, I want to run DC field, and we've written back to them and said, you should consider transferring the experiment. And basically, we just transfer the experiment to the other facility.
I have a kind of a technical question. So that gentleman over there kind of remind me wire bonding. So I also do transport, and there would be cases where you make really small devices, and when you wire bond your sample at home and bring it to Florida, it really frightens me that the wire bonds might break, and there might be small contacts that it would be impossible to do with your hands. So is there a wire bonder here?
Yes,
two.
Two,
I see.
Two. We've got a KNS and a Westbond. They're available for users. They were bought by the user program, so we'll have somebody check you out to use them, and off you go.
Oh, okay, great.
More of those questions. Yeah.
Can you guys patent your technology if you wanted to?
Yes, it's encouraged.
Okay, so because
the magnet designs are patented, for example. Some of the techniques, some of the NMR techniques are patented. So yes, we're encouraged to patent some of the techniques and make money out of them if we could.
What's the licensing demand?
For resistive magnets, it would be somewhat low because you need a 20 megawatt supply to hook it up to. But I know for the HTS NMR probes, there were licensing agreements with places like Bruker and Varian before they went out of business to manufacture probes for customers.
And even the resistive magnets we've licensed to other magnet labs around the world because we're the best.
They can buy a license to the software. We have method developments that does not require the ICR that are patented. We use the ICR to understand the chemistry and then develop a method that you can do on a lower resolution instrument, and those are all patented. So we do patent as well as publish. So usually we put the patent in first and then let the graduate student get it out as a publication.
So in fact, the design for the new 21T ICR magnet is based on the design for the 900 megahertz magnet. So we licensed that technology to Bruker so they could build us a magnet there. Then you're going to continue to build that magnet for others. So yes.
But not as good as ours.
Of course not.
This is about the high B over T facility. So here you just have a week, so you come out and you do your experiment. But at the high B over T facility, where your experiments are going to take a lot longer, do you come out and spend like the entire time there, or do you come and set it up and leave and come back, or what's the process there?
What most users do is they will, first of all, they'll talk to us, and then we invite them, if it's a new user, new experiment, to come visit, design the cell, test it, make it work, and then the user makes sure the experiment's set up correctly, and in almost all cases, goes away. And then we do the experiment for them. And they can control certain things, long distance, but not much. It's just too long. There are exceptions. We've had students from Canada come and spend 6 months doing the experiment, especially the winter time. But now they have to have their own funding. We don't have funding to look after them and house them or anything. But they have professors who are able to obtain funds to come. People propose an experiment. We encourage them on our website. Come talk to us. We'll tell you if it can be done. If we haven't done it before, we'll try and figure out a way. Come visit. We'll talk about it some more. Because if you're going to spend 6 months doing an experiment, you've got to set up right. So we're set up a little differently to the way it's set up here. And if the experiment we think doesn't have the gravitas to merit the cost and expense, we'll be frank and tell you.
So we probably got time for one more. Oh, hang on. There's one back there. He hasn't gotten asked a question yet. Yeah, non-serious question.
Since you guys probably get a lot of applications for Magnet Time every year, how many of them are from complete crackpots, and can you actually talk about them?
I'm the crackpot person. For some reason, the front desk directs all general. Yeah, get forwarded to me, yes. Of Magnet Time requests, almost none are crackpot. So most crackpots don't have the mental discipline to actually fill out an application and write down a coherent proposal on a single piece of paper. We have gotten interesting pyramid diagrams of magnetic thingies that are unclear in little booklets, but they just sort of mail it to us. I have people who ask me to have my graduate students work on a theory of magnetism that will prevent tidal waves and all sorts of other things. So I can go on with a lot of things, but no, formal proposals, none. We end up rejecting almost half the proposals, or at least putting them off for 3 months till the next period as it is, but very few of them are crackpot, none. And some magnets, and yeah, there's a lot of, I don't care. Want to wrap us up, Tim?
So let's thank all our speakers and instructors.